your materials, what you want to know is you're going to need 2 pieces of flat bar per each pump. So this is going to go on each side of the pump. Now, again, your measurements are going to differ depending on your pump. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is drill our holes. Now, I kind of cheated a little bit on my large holes here. I have a good friend down the road who has a machine shop, and he has a punch. So he punched these large holes out for me, did it in half a day, and charged me about $2 per hole. So if you have a machine shop near you, I highly recommend just getting those big holes punched out, because it can take forever to drill these large holes because you got to step them. And it's just it's a long time. It's $2 really well spent here. Now you remember, you want to make sure that when you're measuring your flat bar, that you're giving yourself enough room for this to hang out on the edge of your pump. You just want to make sure that you have enough room that this is going to not stick out too far from your gas pump wall, and obviously not be too close. So for me, I came in about 1.5 inches center for the hole, and that's going to give me enough room. Now what I do have left to do is to drill all my 1/4 inch holes. Now we're going to drill 4 1/4 inch holes per mount. So as you can see here, here's my original template. You see we have our 2 1/4 inch holes on this side and 2 1/4 inch holes on this side. Now one thing you want to keep in mind when you're measuring on site, when you're measuring the gas pumps, is to make sure you take that panel off when you can and see where those gas lines are falling into that wall. And that can help you determine where to put your 1/4 inch mounts. The very first time I ever made this design, I didn't really take into account anything that was inside that panel, and I just sort of randomly chose the distance from the end of my bar where I wanted to put my mounts. And when I got out on site, almost every single hole I had to drill was right dead smack in the middle of a hose, a major gas line hose. Now I've got about 20 bars I got to drill these holes into. Now for you, obviously it's easier when you set up a jig. For me, I'm just going to use this template that we already have. This is exactly the hole pattern that I want. I'm just going to throw these on top of my bar and set them on the drill press to start drilling all these holes out. So let's get to it. All right, now we have all of our holes drilled. We're gonna take our flat bar and all those 1/4 inch holes, we're just gonna put the bolts in them. Now this is why, you'll be able to see here in a second, why this is so important that we had those threaded all the way to the top. So we're gonna put our bolts in there, just like that. We're gonna take our nuts and just put it on there and get it good and snug, not too tight. And there you go. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna fill all the holes with the bolts, and then we're gonna come back and weld the bolt heads. Okay, so I just finished up welding all of the bolt heads onto our flat bar, and you see, this is the reason why we wanted to tighten these down a little bit, so we could easily weld these without the bolts moving around. Now once this cools off a bit, we'll just pull these, pull the nuts right off of there, and we'll be ready to go. Now, I want you to see something. Now, I'm welding on a wooden table here. I know, don't give me any flack about welding on the wooden table, big deal. But what I want you to see here is this scrap. So if you're welding on a metal table, it's important for you to get some sort of scrap just to lift this off of the table, because what you don't want to happen is you don't want your bolts to be resting on your table like this if it's a metal table, because what can happen is when you're welding, they're going to get grounded down there, and you can end up sticking and actually mess up the beginning threads of your bolts. Now we've had that happen before. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a grinder with a flat disc, and I'm just going to take off any of the edges on here, just because this is going to be out in public and I don't want anyone, cutting themselves, running into it or anything like that. So we're going to clean them up, soften it up a bit, and we're going to move on to our 3/4 inch rods. All right, so our next step is we're going to start drilling our holes in our 3/4 inch pipe. Now I've already cut my pipe to where the length that I need it to be, so now I'm going to start drilling my 1/2 inch holes just in the ends here. Now why 1/2 inch? Well, it doesn't necessarily always have to be 1/2 inch. Now for me, I'm using a 1/2 inch because the locks that I'm using, or that I recommend using for these security bar systems, is a disc lock, simply because the disc lock is the hardest lock for anyone to break off of. And because this is curved here, this 1/2 inch gives me a little extra room for that curve to get through. Now, if you're using a padlock and the bar is straight, you wouldn't need a 1/2 inch unless you were using a really big padlock. You know, you can drill this hole a little bit smaller. Now, I've put together a very simple jig to do these holes. Since I've got about 20 of these to make right now, I've just got some gas pipe here, and it fits. The inside diameter, the ID, is 3/4 inch, almost perfectly. So my 3/4 inch OD is fitting absolutely perfectly into this 3/4 inch ID gas pipe. Now I've just drilled my hole, and I've welded a little stop here on the other end. So that way I can just take this tube and slide it right in there until it stops. And then I can run my drill through and I have a perfect hole. Now that we've finished drilling our holes, the next step is to make sure we get all the burrs and everything off of it, make sure it's nice and smooth. Remember, people are going to be touching these things. And then we're going to weld our fender washers on the other end. So we're going to flip this over so I don't weld the washer on where I'm putting my lock. Flip this over. I've got a cool little thing here on my table to hold this. So we're just going to take that, take our fender washer, just slap it right on top of there. Boom. That's all we're going to do. We're going to weld that on there nice and good. And this is going to act as our stopper as we're sliding these through the holes. Now, all that's left to do is to paint these things up, paint them however you like, and then we're going to go install them on pumps. Now make sure you go to watch part 2 of this video so you can see how we're going to install these on the gas pumps without blowing anything up.